So one of the characteristics of self-leadership is courage, is where you're facing your shadows and you're acknowledging that you do have limitations. And in order to overcome those limitations, it takes courage for you to find out really where those gaps are and where the opportunities are. Welcome to our show. My name is Jenny Woon.
And I'm Toni Singh.
And we're at In the House podcast. We have such an interesting topic today because often we have to do this every day. But how often do you look in the mirror at yourself, Toni? Well, every day when you're getting ready. But what I mean is look really hard at yourself, not just the physical characteristics, but about your actions and your thought processes.
I mean, I would say more recently I've been doing it more consistently for sure. I would say though, I mean, I've always wanted to improve certain things. So that's just been my personality. But more specifically, after I had kids even, right? It was like, oh, how can I do things better? How am I being right now? How is my mood or my internal being affecting the outer world? So it's a constant everyday challenge. What would you say in regards to that? Do you agree?
Oh, I'm every minute of the
every
day
day.
is how do I keep practicing and trying to understand who I am, identifying all my desired experiences. How am I intentionally guiding myself down towards working towards my goals? And it's not often. I don't think a lot of people in our business do this very often.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, when we go to school and everything and when they're a formal education system, I don't think that it was historically taught. So then fast forward to, you've got your own business, maybe you're selling real estate, you're interacting with a lot of people. I think that it is a little bit of consistency and skill development to become, the awareness is certainly key.
Yes.
But today's episode, we're exploring the art of self-leadership and personal development, which is a lot with what our podcast has to do with. And Jenny has asked this very important question, which is, why is true self-leadership so rare? So that's going to kick us off today.
Well, I think it's really rare only because, number one, we want to do better, we want to be better, but perhaps we are fearful of how to take the next steps.
Yeah, or we just don't know how. There's a lot of things that require focus, and we're going to be speaking to those points today. And we're also going to uncover the reasons behind its scarcity. Why is self-leadership so rare?
Well, let's start by examining the impact of the culture of self-leadership. Our culture, typically when you think of it, maybe most often people will relate it to somebody who's wealthy or somebody who's a CEO over personal development. So someone who shows that they carry wealth, a celebrity perhaps, right? Or someone who perhaps somebody like, who can I think of that shows like materialistic things at the same time. And so I think we've gotten into the point where it's like superficial. And so there's a lot of emphasis on success and wealth, but then we model our behavior with that. So, but how do you get to consistently being really like having effort and practicing the daily habits of being consistent and paying attention to the progress and whether or not you need to re-navigate and restructure, re-strategize the direction that you're taking?
For sure. And so I would agree that in our Western culture today, absolutely, with social media, not that social media is bad, but things like that, what tends to happen sometimes, especially with young people, is that they're modeling their behavior after that wealthy person or what they believe to be shiny, like hustle culture.
Mm-hmm.
And those are all things outside of yourself. So we're looking at now turning inward, so to speak, right? So what's happening on the internal level.
Mm-hmm.
So self-leadership, so effort and self-leadership, it doesn't happen by accident.
Mm-mm.
As we mentioned, it does require consistent effort. We said daily practice. You said minute to minute, which is so key in order to make progress.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so funny that Jenny said this so perfectly earlier. The pursuit of wealth often overshadows the importance of the personal development.
Yeah,
So when we
absolutely.
talk about personal development and self-leadership, what kinds of things can we focus on in order to encourage those traits and those habits?
Firstly, I believe that we would have to recognize some of the pitfalls of working on autopilot.
Okay.
So when you're consistently doing transaction after transaction after transaction, you're
In
on
real
this
estate?
autopilot mode, right? And when's the last time you actually, you know this, every transaction is different.
Yeah,
And no two clients are the same. So
absolutely.
when's the last time you were present, you were like really, really present and understanding how you felt about the transaction, how you interacted with that client, and you're consistent, and where you consistently evaluate and reevaluate your actions through every process, like every point in that process
Mhm.
for that transaction to, successfully complete.
100%.
So to me, a great way to avoid the pitfalls of an autopilot is really trying to perfect. I think it's called the what's that Japanese that chart where they
Chart.
all like kind of the circles and they all
Oh, it does have a name. I don't
right. It
remember.
begins with a K. Anyways,
Okay.
yeah, you're on
Ka
the right track.
I know, but I can't it's not on the tip of my brain. We'll
Okay.
have to discuss that later.
So it's almost that where they're trying to refine that process over and over again so that it's smooth
Yeah.
and you're just growing because things change in our business with technology and
Honestly,
everything.
I really appreciate this conversation so much because we're getting into very specific things that people can work on for themselves. Like it's a big discussion.
Mm-hmm.
How do you even break it down?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree. So you're saying um, the awareness and everything with clients and like, are you saying also being in the moment?
Actually, definitely being really present. So when you're feeling like you automatically assume the client is going to know what you're going to do,
Yeah.
then that means that
You're not in the
you're
moment.
not in the
You're
moment.
actually in future. You're
You're
anticipating.
already thinking that you're working ahead versus that client may not even know what's happening, right?
Yeah.
And so you kind of lost, even though you think you're kind of in control, you want to be able to, you want to regain that control over those actions and really be self-monitoring the decisions that you're making
Mhm.
alongside with your client, and you're not just reacting because things have happened already.
It's such a good point too, because if we're talking about real estate transactions, typically they are very emotional, right, for a seller or a buyer. So
Mhm.
then when you're trying to break down your emotional intelligence among the already emotional situation, there's a lot to unpack. So why don't we start with the 5 characteristics
Yes.
of emotional intelligence? We'll go into each one in deep detail, but the 5 components are self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. So let's touch on each one.
So self-awareness was what I mentioned first, is
Yes.
the ability to recognize and understand our moods, our energies, like where the blockages are, how it's impacting you.
Yeah.
And when you walk through the door and you're greeting your husband or your kids, and how it impacts others. And so being really self-aware, by doing that, you assess your emotional state at the moment.
So I just told Jenny a story about my self awareness this past week.
Mhm.
I purposely had to give myself several timeouts
Ah.
before speaking to clients. And it wasn't because I was self aware at the time that my mood, it was actually like it was a tough week. because I'm human and we have those, right? And I knew that when certain things happen during some of their sales transactions, right? It's out of our control. Still needs to be explained in the moment in a clear, concise manner. But I knew at the time that for me, the energy I was giving off, which had nothing to do at all with those sales, it could have impacted what that
Could have turned out.
experience would have looked like for the client. So self-awareness, Jenny, you're absolutely right.
But you just mentioned self-regulation.
Okay, that's the second one. Yeah,
Yeah.
self-regulation.
So you took an action on that.
I had to not speak to anyone before.
You disrupted that
That's right.
impulse.
That's right. And so self-regulation is the ability to control disruptive impulses and think before acting.
And you definitely made a redirection.
Yes.
Before something bad could have occurred.
Yeah, for sure.
Internal motivation. Internal motivation goes beyond financial gains, or even just getting a status. For me, driven by something like a bigger purpose or a certain calling or a certain mission that's better for the greater good, rather than just for your own reasons.
Absolutely.
Is going to perpetually feel like you're in it for the long haul and that you're making a greater impact than just that one single transaction.
I have a question about internal motivation, just your perspective on it. Do you think that internal motivation can be taught? Or do you think it's something more innate? Like it has to be authentic to the person though, right?
I think everybody's guiding star or North Star is very different. And only because everybody's values are different and you want to be able to align with exactly what you're meant to do and be here for, which is called your dharma. It's what your soul's purpose is.
Yes.
And I think that, I don't think if you say your kids are your motivation, I really think that you still haven't dug deep enough to really know what your actual mission is. Because a lot of people's answers are, well, my mission is to make sure I take care of my kids. Well, no,
it's probably deeper than that.
It can go deeper. So I'm not saying that you're not a deep person.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that most people haven't formulated a bigger reason why they're here. Yeah.
I love when we go into these spiritual little tangents in our podcast. The next one is empathy. So truly understanding somebody's emotional reactions by first knowing and accepting our own emotions. So that's really important.
Right.
And I guess the more in tune that we are with our own emotions, the more empathetic to others that you can become. I mean, I look back a long time ago and I wasn't actually always the most empathetic person when I was younger. And that really was difficult in terms of feeling or having that empathy for the many emotions and experiences that, a friend or a colleague or a client was going through. If you can't tap into that, it's very difficult to be able to provide the space for people.
Yeah. I want to also add about the compassion part of having self-compassion, where you want to be able to accept your mistakes that you've faced.
Yeah.
But it also means acknowledging that you are already good enough and you're striving to improve, because there is so much room. We're only human to be able to learn so much. So when you're self-criticizing or self-sabotaging and not being kind to yourself, it really will affect your ability to be in the position of self-leadership.
Absolutely.
Social skills. The final thing is to help build rapport. You're managing relationships and influencing others by essentially knowing how to interact with people and nurture relationships in your life.
Yeah.
I think the biggest, most important thing, and especially one of the things that allow people to live longer, is that they build community and they have connections and true connections with people.
This reminds me, have you seen, it's related but a bit separate. Have you seen on Netflix that show Blue Zones?
Yes. I
Okay, so
watched all the episodes.
it was amazing. And basically you're talking about community, belonging, nurturing, and that was really evident in that series
Right.
for the people that were living to be centurions and beyond. So
Right.
very cool.
And how does this relate back to self-leadership when you have social skills?
Oh, that is a good question. How does it relate back to self-leadership when you have social skills? Well, I think that I actually don't even know how to answer that. I would say that the social skills and the empathy and compassion are all working together and very important, because if you're not employing all of those characteristics, it's very difficult to be able to, again, provide the space for, as a leader, for the team member to work through their own, I want to say work through their own challenges. Because being a leader is not necessarily pointing it out to them. It's allowing them to discover what they're meant to. They have to work through the problem on their own, because only then will they have that empowerment. Does that make sense? I don't know if I answered your question fully. I tried. I tried really hard. Would you say something different? Let's turn the question around.
So the question I asked Toni is, how do social skills play into self-leadership? Okay, so for me, the way I see social skills play is being able to, so I think if you know who you are, you want to share it with the world. You want to be able to lead other people. You want to be able to make influential decisions that will positively affect other people. And so you want to be able to influence others in adopting what you believe in. And if you are leading a path of making change or of standing in integrity, I do believe that you have to announce it, or you have to passionately say it out loud so that there's accountability in a way.
Yeah.
Right?
Because then it's out there in the world.
Yeah, it's out there in the world. And so when you're proud and presenting yourself with what you believe in, you're going to want to showcase it to people around you. And so the influencing side of things, the being able to have the social skills to interact and not please anybody, but really just stand up for who you are, but like announcing that to somebody without the ego, without
important that you said
with
that.
humility, with humility. I think that's
so
really
you're
important.
saying basically knowing who you are, being authentic about that, speaking up about it, but without the egoic thing. It's just like, this is who I am.
Yes.
This is who I am. This is what I'm up to. This is what is lighting me up at the end of the day.
And it also means that you have boundaries, and that setting boundaries without making someone feel out of place, that is a social skill within itself.
It is. We could do a whole episode on boundaries. It's something that I've been working at.
Yes,
but
you
yeah,
have.
it's an amazing, it's an important quality.
Yeah.
Important quality.
So going into some of the qualities in self-leadership is true curiosity. It's honestly the most natural thing that you can be, to outside of programming yourself and outside of trying to fit into the norm.
Absolutely. If you look at kids, right, they're the most curious people around. They're asking a ton of questions. And it's so funny that a young child, if they ask a question and they're between the ages of 3 to 5, they ask you a question, you give a response. But they ask the same question again because they don't understand the response. They're not yet conditioned, right, in the way that we are. So the plasticity in their brains is so amazing because they're thinking, well, that was the response, but that doesn't fully answer my question. What about all these other things? And so I think that you and I, we attended school for a long time. And then we did schooling to become realtors, and we've been forever learners. But I would agree that to some degree, there's conditioning and programming, and that can become involved with self-identity. So The next one in terms of qualities towards self-leadership is self-honesty.
Mm.
Ooh, it's a good one. Honesty and integrity are essential for self-discovery. I mean, have you ever had it happen along your journey where you had to really look at yourself or a situation and take ownership with yourself about, oh, am I being honest with myself about something?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it's in this business, you can easily fall into the social norm
Yeah,
or fall into the capitalism of our
a
business
lot.
because there's a lot of that. And so does that actually sit well with you? And does it actually belong in your identity?
Yeah. I think it's important and we want to be able to sleep at night, right? So
Hmm.
it's interesting as well because when you really start honing in on honesty and your self integrity, it can actually become something so like the smaller things that matter, right? It's
Hmm.
like on one level, it could be being late.
Hmm.
Oh, you were late. You weren't integrous there. There was a promise that was made.
Yeah.
But that's a different form of it, right? There's so many different levels if you're really going inward. I hope that makes sense. Accountability
Hmm.
would be another characteristic related to
Yes.
this.
Yes.
So let's expand on that.
Well, what most often you want to be able to take responsibility for your thoughts, your emotions, your actions, for it, which is crucial for growth, and knowing that what you do today will affect what's gonna happen tomorrow,
Mhm.
right? And so for me, it's all about self-discipline. It's about holding yourself accountable for the time that you're putting in, the using the resources effectively, that you don't go super mad or you're pushing yourself harder and harder. But you really do understand you're consciously prioritizing all the right things at the right time, which to me is like really good self-management. So that's accountability for yourself.
Mhm.
I also feel like most of the time, um, it goes back to autopilot, knowing that you are not going to be programming yourself to just being stuck at one place,
Mhm.
right?
For
And
sure.
you're continuously growing. So,
You did mention this one earlier, but humility. So
mhm.
important. I mean, even you and I, right? We're lifelong learners. We don't know it all. It would be impossible to. And even if you're relating this to real estate, there could be something new that happens during the negotiations or something that you didn't know about. Or maybe you forgot to do one small thing. We're only human. Sometimes those things can happen. So having the humility, owning up
Mhm.
to, what your part was and taking that accountability and responsibility as well, and then moving forward.
Yeah, which takes courage.
It does.
So, one of the characteristics of self leadership is courage, is where you're facing your shadows and you're acknowledging that you do have limitations. And in order to overcome those limitations, it takes courage for you to find out really where those gaps are and
Mhm.
where the opportunities are. And being really, really soft and kind to yourself with self compassion, as we talked about.
Mhm.
When you foster self acceptance, it just um, organically allows things to change positively because your perspective at the same time changes.
Mhm. Assertiveness is an important one as well. So, what do we mean by that? It's so important, right? As a leader and self leadership, there is a balance between being aggressive and being passive.
Mhm.
And that is crucial for self leadership. You need a little bit of both, and you have to find the balance there. I mean,
I think we talked about superpowers,
we
and a lot
did.
of our the great leaders that have come on, who are CEOs as well as of their company, they talk about being able to make decisions.
Mhm.
And when you are in that role, you do have to be the person who takes the responsibility of the wrong decision and the responsibility of the right decisions. And by being aggressive and confident in your decision, and also again, working through the influencing of your
Mhm.
team, and that's where,
Well, sometimes things also need to be said, right? Or dealt with.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
In a kind way.
yeah, which is part of the social skills,
I
right?
know.
Yeah. the willingness to be uncomfortable and to be able to adapt to feedback. And the feedback may come on to you really strong.
Yeah.
It may come in as something that you need to change that you maybe weren't expecting. But the willingness to be adaptable, being able to be flexible with decisions.
For sure. Inner faith, so important. Trusting your inner guide is essential for self-leadership. And Jenny reminded me of this when we were on a flight to Edmonton.
Oh, yes.
You did.
That was March this year.
Yeah, it was, right? Yeah. And we were going to speak at or I guess moderate the framework retreats out there with amazing realtors out in Edmonton. And you had said to me, you said, you just need to trust. And you're right. You reminded me that the inner faith is so key. And I was lacking there at that point in time.
That came on that
was
comment,
it a download?
It was, well, it's from everything that I've been learning is that the universe is happening
for you,
for us,
not to you.
Right.
Yes.
And it people can argue that it's already been laid out, like our future has been laid out. And it's really just stepping in to
You're right.
what's already set out for us.
But when you said that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know why I didn't see it. Probably because I was in it and I felt so calm afterwards. And like, just trust.
I don't even remember what you were.
It was about, we were talking
having
about
a tough time on.
No, it wasn't. It was expansion. We were talking about expanding business or working on new things. And you were like, just trust. I'm like, okay, I'll just do that. There was a lot going on at the time. It was all positive though, for sure.
So what are some tools and resources that you can go to? Firstly is understanding your personal values. There's probably about over 300 personal values. There are so many guides and
a lot,
resources that are available, especially online, where you can actually maybe group them together into like 5 different categories. You end up having 5. I have kind of 5 core values. Like Oakwin, we have 7 core values that we work through every day, and nothing can knock that. Nothing. We will stand by it no matter what conflict we may have. We always go back to our core values, and that will guide our behaviors and our decisions to be able to come to just a good feeling that where we stand with our decision, it's basically who we are.
I like that. Very well said. Clarifying your personal vision. Do you think that, I guess having a clear vision for your future self, crucial for self-leadership and having a North Star to get to. Would you say that personal vision or your personal vision has changed over the years?
Absolutely. I would say as I am able to tap into more resources and more doors open, my vision has changed and evolved for the better. And I'm like so glad I'm open-minded to changes. I think the tools that you can have would be like a vision board, would be believing in manifestation. So you can write yourself a check, in your first year career,
I love that.
every year, and that's the plan to make that income level. Clarifying your personal vision. I know that a lot of people put business plans together, and what I've been doing with a lot of the agents is rather than I'm sure a lot of agents that as well, they put a business plan together for the year, but then they put it aside and they don't take it out ever. So I've worked in almost like a day-to-day daily log with my clients or with my agents, and they are keeping track of how they are progressing towards their vision and their goals. And so they keep this document open every day so that they're on point and they're basically being disciplined.
Well, the micro goals make up that macro vision, right? So it is important to audit on a daily basis.
Right.
Identifying strengths and weaknesses. Sometimes that's challenging, right? For people, you don't want to necessarily delve into your weaknesses, but it's important so that you know what you can improve upon. And recognizing strengths and weaknesses is vital to personal growth.
I would say, yeah, absolutely. I think when you understand what your weaknesses are, you can outsource it. And you can, I know for a fact you will go further honing in on your strengths and giving away all the
Oh, absolutely. That's for every single person because we all have components of both. What are your favorite assessments for identifying strengths and weaknesses?
I've done the Gallup. I think that's a really useful tool online. What's a really good one that was shared by our coach was the saboteurs.
Oh, it's so good. I think we were similar though, weren't we on
The
those?
overachiever and restless. Was it that one?
Mine was, hyperachiever
Yes.
and I forget the second one. It wasn't restless. It was something else. Restless was third for me, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Mine at the very bottom was pleaser and
Me
victim.
too.
Yeah.
Me too. I'm like, nope, because we take responsibility for shit.
Yeah. Yeah. So knowing what your strengths are and when you can hire someone to do the things that you're not good at, your ability to want to like get up to go to work is like that much more like a higher percentage at it.
Mm-hmm.
So in summary,
conclusion.
self-leadership is honestly very rare when you can sit back and assess, and don't forget to stop being in this complacent position of like autopilot, observing your emotions, your actions, your behaviors through every transaction so that you know how you can improve. I know for me, like I said, I do it daily and it is exhausting, but it also just motivates me to want to do better and be better. I'm not doing it for like to showcase anything or to make more money.
Yeah,
honestly.
This is not an ego thing. It's just like you just want to improve.
Yeah, I think it's just that I want to know that I've done everything that I was capable of and reach my potential before I left Earth.
That's right. And then you can sleep at night. Right? It's
okay,
true.
yes,
So
sleep
true.
at night as well.
Oh, yeah, you don't sleep.
So I want to thank you guys for tuning into this podcast. If you found this episode really insightful, please subscribe. Please share it with your colleagues and leave us a review. Your feedback is so valuable to us. Stay tuned for more episodes on self-leadership and personal growth. See you next week.
Thanks for joining us.